Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. I'm Shafiqul Islam Shobuj. I teach English at the Department of English, University of Burishal. So in today's video, we're going to tell you how to use Zoom properly, what netiquette is, and what Zoom netiquette is. So these are very important things to know as Zoom has been being overwhelmingly used by students and university professors alike. And most importantly, the place where I work at, Burishal University, is going to start online classes pretty soon, and the students have to attend the classes using Zoom. So in today's video, we're going to learn a couple of things. First, we will start with how to install Zoom and what are the best practices. Then we will move our discussion into how to try Zoom before actually entering into your Zoom meeting. Then we will focus on a couple of things that you should do before your meeting begins. Afterwards, we will move our discussion into what to do and what not to do during the actual Zoom meeting. Then we will talk about netiquette, and finally we will conclude with Zoom netiquette. So let's begin. First of all, you have to know how to get started with Zoom. So the first thing you have to do is to install the Zoom application either on your computer, it can be a PC or a Mac, or your Android or Apple device. So what you have to do is to go to the Google Play Store if you're using an Android mobile phone. You have to go to zoom.us if you are using Zoom on your laptop, and you have to go to the Apple App Store if you intend to use Zoom on your Apple. So one thing students, mostly do not do is that they don't install Zoom on more than one device. So, it throws them into a challenge. For example, if you install Zoom in more than one device, this allows you to continue your Zoom meeting even if your primary device loses its connection. So somehow your computer, which is your primary device, stops working. Doesn't mean that you have to stop your Zoom meeting in the midway. You can use your probably secondary device like your mobile or something else. So it's always better to install Zoom on more than one device and keep both the devices ready during your meeting. The next thing you have to do is to set up the Zoom app. You can do that pretty easily by creating an account. You have to enter your email account, email ID, and you have to use a unique password. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is that in no circumstance, so what I mean is never use your email password into a Zoom account. Which I mean is that there are some people who use the same password for their email address, and they use the same password for their Zoom account. Never do that, because if someone breaches into your Zoom security, which means they can enter into your email account as well, and they can hack your Facebook account. So never use same password in more than one location. The next thing you have to do is to check the audio and video settings. So it's always prescribed that you use a microphone or a headphone when you are using Zoom instead of the built-in audio and audio setting. So this should be done primarily because your microphone can be put, or your headphone can be put closer to your mouth than the device, built-in audio device. So this is the reason why you should always try to use a functional microphone or a headphone. So once your Zoom application is installed into your computer or your mobile device, what you have to do is to try to do a couple of things before you actually enter into your meeting. The first thing is practice a Zoom meeting with your friends. Now, if this is the first time you're trying to use Zoom, what you should do is to call a bunch of your friends, set up a meeting with them so that you can get acquainted with the process, with the surface and everything of Zoom. So by doing so, what you can do is to test your microphone and you can test your camera. Now, one thing you should do is to check the stability of your internet connection. For example, if your internet connection drops, sometimes it has very high speed and sometimes it drops to like 2G network. So in that case, what you can do is to go to fast.com. The website is listed here, and check the internet connection a couple of times, like 3 or 4 times to check whether the internet connectivity is stable or it fluctuates. The next thing you should do is to check the audio. So like I said previously, what you have to do is to use a functional, operational, and good quality earphone, microphone, or a headphone to speak over the Zoom application. So it's always better to use an external audio device for this purpose. The next thing you have to do is to, you have to keep this in mind, that you have to keep your microphone close to your mouth, not so close to your mouth that the air that flows from your mouth touches the microphone. No, not that close. But what you have to do is to keep it to a close position so that the best sound is captured by your mic or microphone. Now, the next thing you have to do, this is pretty crucial, is that you have to join the meeting from a very quiet place with no noise. So this is very important, because when you're trying to speak over your Zoom app in a meeting, it's very important that you are in a very noise-free place, a place where there is no noise to distract you. Now, the next thing you have to do is to avoid attending the meeting from a confined place that creates echo. Now, this is very important. In some of my meetings, what I have seen is that students choose one corner of their room with no furniture or anything, or maybe a place under their staircase. Now, in places like those, create a kind of a problem for the microphone, because along with capturing your speech, what it also does is to capture the echo it creates. Now, that's the reason why you shouldn't go to any place where it creates an echo when speaking over your microphone while attending the Zoom meeting. The next thing you have to do is don't sit right below or next to the ceiling fan. Now, this is very important. If you are directly exposed to the ceiling fan, if you sit underneath it or you sit next to a wall fan or something like that, what happens is the airflow, the air passage, it sort of creates a distraction for the microphone. The audio cannot be captured well. So, it poses a certain degree of problem. The next thing you have to do is very important. When you are not speaking on Zoom, we will get into more discussion on this. But when you are not using your microphone, what you have to do is to mute it. You have to keep it mute at all times when you are not participating in the discussion. And the other things you have to do is to check your camera. Now, this is important. Don't turn off your camera unless you have network issues. I know that during this lockdown period, some of our students are not even in divisional headquarters, or maybe you're not in Borishal, or maybe you're in your village. So I understand that you probably don't have a stable internet connection. So unless you have very slow internet connection, maybe you don't have a 3G connection or something like that, 4G connection, or if you do not have a private space, do not turn off your camera. Now, this happened a couple of days ago. What happened was that one of my students attended a class from a shop. He was sitting in front of a shop, local grocery store, and there were people behind him. So it was very awkward to see my student being surrounded by a bunch of people, and it's sort of distracting. So if you are in a place like that, what you should do is to turn off your camera. But other than that, I have given three conditions. First, if you do not have a very slow internet connection, or if you do not have a personal space where you can attend the meeting from, do not turn off the camera, because it looks very awkward when you are unavailable on the Zoom app, but you are attending the meetings. But okay, for the factual correctness, I'm giving you some statistical data. The first thing is that for each hour of Zoom meeting, depending on your connection, if it's very high speed, it can take up to 1.6 gigabyte of data. Or if the connection is very slow, it can take as little as 545 megabyte. So now that's very important. I will come to this a bit later. The other thing you have to do is to look at the camera when talking, not at the person on the screen. Now, this happens with some of my students. What they do is, when I'm talking, maybe I appear at the bottom of the screen, and the students keep looking at the student who's talking to me. What he does is to, keep looking at me towards the bottom of the screen. But don't do that. What happens is that when you look at the camera, what happens is the person you're talking to thinks that you are looking at him. And that's why it's very important to look at the camera instead of the person on the screen. Okay, now that's very important. So let's move our discussion into what you should do before the meeting. First of all, you have to check if your bandwidth is adequate to complete the Zoom session, or if you have broadband connection, if it's stable or not. Now, this is very important because there are a couple of reasons involved. The first thing is that if your connection gets cut off in the middle of the meeting, it means you lose some very informative or very important discussion. And that's why you have to be able to predict how much time the meeting is going to last. Usually the teacher says how long the discussion will last. And before entering into the meeting, what you have to do is to check the bandwidth you have. Okay? So, for example, if the duration is 1 hour, you have to calculate that I have like 1.5 gigabyte of data. So from that, maybe I will use up, if you have mobile data in that case, so I will use up about 900 megabyte. So how much data will I have left? You have to do the calculation. Or if you are using a broadband connection, what you have to do is to go to fast.com a couple of times and check if the connection is stable. Now that's very important. To be interrupted in the middle of the meeting or class in this case will be very detrimental for you. The second thing you have to be aware of, and you have to tell your family. Now this is very important. Before I go into the discussion, let me share an experience. So the other day I was conducting a session, and one of my students was talking to me, and his mom appeared in the middle of the discussion, and he had to shout at her and tell her to leave the room. Now, that was a bit rude, but the thing is that if you are you already know that a Zoom session is going to be held, and the approximate length of the Zoom session. So what you have to do is to tell your family members that the Zoom session is going to start at that time, and this will probably last till that specific time. So please do not, disturb me or intrude into my room or my private space during, that 1 hour or 90 minutes or maybe 2 hours. Okay? Tell them this very politely. Make them understand that you are going to attend a class. The next thing is that, I've already told you about that. So the backup device, you have installed your Zoom to. So instead of just using one device, what you should do is to, install Zoom on a backup device. Now what you have to do is to keep the backup device standby right next to you. For example, you are attending the meeting from your laptop maybe, and it's connected through broadband. Now in the middle of your meeting, broadband goes off and you don't know what to do, and you're cut off. So what you should do is to install Zoom on your mobile phone as well, and buy some pocket data so that you can participate in the meeting even if electricity goes off and your broadband is cut off. Now, that's what you should do. The next thing is very important. What you should do is to avoid any rough, coarse background when attending the meeting. You should try to use a plain background, or if you have some graphics knowledge, what you should try to do is to use a green screen, and by doing that you can also change the background. You can watch videos on YouTube on how to do that. So use a plain background. That would be very important for you, for the other participants to, pay concentration on you, to have, good view of you. The next thing you have to do is this is very important. Place the camera parallel to your eyes. What some people do is that they place the camera underneath them or on top of them. So it gives an obscure or skewed view of you. You don't look good in the video. So what you should do is, if you are using Zoom from your laptop, try to put the built-in camera in a place that's parallel to your eyes, not below, not high. The same goes for your mobile device. If you're using it from a mobile device, what you have to do is to place your mobile phone at a place where the camera is towards your eyes, parallel to your eyes, not below, not up. That's what you have to do. The other thing, it's also very important. I have seen some of my students do this. They keep the window behind them open so the light enters into the room. And what happens is that I can only see the background. I can only see the window and not my students at all, because his face gets dark and he cannot be seen at all. Don't do this. So now what you have to do is to keep light in front of you. Use good lighting. If you have a table lamp or something like that, light it on and place it before you. And this will increase the brightness in front of you, and the focus will be on you. And if there is any window or any door behind you, try to keep it closed, or maybe use a curtain to cover the light. So that's how you can keep the focus on yourself. The next thing you have to do is to put your cell phone at a very stable place. Now, some of my students in some of my earlier classes have done this mistake. What they did was to hold the cell phone. So if you hold the cell phone, what it does is to create a kind of shaking. So the person or the people on the other end of the Zoom meeting, what they see is that your video is constantly moving here and there. On one hand, it breaks the concentration of the rest of the members who are participating along with you, and also it gives that kind of a false image of yourself that you are such a novice, you don't know how to use a cell phone at all. So that's why it's very important to keep your mobile phone at a stable place and not to hold it at all. The next thing is also very important. It's that you have to use, you have to wear proper clothing. You have to dress properly and decently. Now, dress according to the cultural values, the cultures that we have in our country. Don't wear dresses that are inappropriate for the class setting that the meeting is going to be like. So the dress that you cannot wear and come to the department should be avoided. Now, I don't have to give a lecture on what kind of dress you should wear, but you already know. So don't wear any dress that contradicts with our cultural values. The next thing you have to do is to keep in mind a couple of things. The first, while in the meeting. So the first is that try to join the meeting between 5 and 10 minutes earlier than the schedule. For example, if the meeting starts or is scheduled to start at 3 p.m., try to be there within 2:50 or 2:55. That way, if there is any technical glitch or something like that, you can get like 5 or 10 minutes extra time to cover it up. So the next thing you have to do is, I have seen some of my students do the mistake. Instead of putting up their names, what they do is do nothing. They leave it blank. For example, that way the Zoom app creates an auto ID, something which is very obscure. So what you have to do is, like shown in this picture, along with giving your meeting ID, what you have to do is to put your name, like I have put my name, followed by your roll number in the class. That way the teacher can easily understand who you are. He or she can recognize you pretty well. And the two other buttons, the first one is don't connect to audio and turn off my video. Keep those two turned off as well. The next thing you should do is to test your microphone and speaker settings so that you can hear the host or the speaker while entering into the Zoom setting. But don't forget to mute yourself once you are in the meeting room. Okay, once the greeting is done, mute yourself and keep yourself muted until the host asks you to speak. Okay, this is an etiquette. Now, why should you keep your microphone muted? Because some kind of noise might get generated in the background where you are. Maybe a child can pass and a child can cry, or maybe a pet is there, or maybe something else happens which creates a kind of a noise, or maybe a background music is running at your place. It will disturb all the other members of the meeting. That's why you have to keep your microphone muted at all times unless you speak. But what you have to keep in mind is that you have to turn on your mic when the host asks you to speak. Now, this happens very often, that sometimes the host asks you to speak, some participants to speak. Now, what they do is that they completely forget that their microphone is turned off. So what they say in the first 5 or 7 or 10 seconds before they understand that the microphone is muted, that part of the conversation is gone. And it's a wastage of the time of all the other members, all the other attendees of the Zoom meeting, as well as it's very annoying. Now, that's why you have to keep yourself alert, that when you try to speak, you have to keep your microphone turned on. When you speak, you have to turn on the microphone. The next thing you have to do is to introduce yourself the first time you speak. So maybe your class has 70 members and 50 people are attending the class, or maybe 60. The teacher might not be able to recognize you by your name, or he might not notice who you are on the screen because the screen is pretty small. So what you should do is to introduce yourself, like maybe you can tell your nickname, like I'm Sakib or something like that. So the teacher can recognize you instantly. That's what you should do. But don't repeat doing it when you are participating in the discussion later. So doing it once should be enough. The next thing is, do not turn on the mic and start talking when someone else is speaking. This is very annoying. For example, someone has been given the floor and that person is speaking. What you do is to turn on your mic and keep speaking while the other person is speaking. So it creates that kind of an enormous noise, enormous chaos in the Zoom meeting. This is very annoying. That's why you should refrain yourself from unmuting yourself and start speaking in the middle of someone else's discussion, because that slot has been given to that person. What you should do is, as a decent person, what you should do is to wave your hand so that the host will understand you are trying to say something. Okay? The host will come back to you maybe in a couple of minutes. Till then, hold your nerve and keep waiting. Maybe keep developing the idea that you wanted to share, or the counter question that you wanted to raise. The next thing is, this is also very annoying. I understand that Zoom meetings can be very long and very hectic, but do not use your cell phone or laptop for any other purpose during the meeting. So it's like the same old classroom thing. When you use your cell phone in the classroom, the teacher understands and he or she gets very annoyed. And it has the negative, impact on the teacher. So the teacher understands that you are not paying concentration. So this is not something you should do, be it a physical setting in the class, or if it's a virtual class through a Zoom meeting. Never do that. Okay, stay in the meeting, because this is like 1 hour or 1 hour 30 minutes. This is not a lot of time. Why do you need to be engaged with something else? The next thing you should not do is not to get engaged with in discussion with any other participant. So for example, Zoom meetings are also get-together places for the classmates. So maybe the teacher is trying to get engaged in a discussion, but you are trying to talk to one of your classmates because you have seen that student after a while. Don't do that. This is very annoying for the teacher and for the other members of the Zoom meeting. If you want to talk to your friend, it's fine. Let the Zoom meeting end and call your friend, or maybe call your friend on Zoom. That should be fine. So don't do this. It's very annoying. The next thing is very important for students. Since you are attending a Zoom meeting, Zoom class, what you should do is to take notes and prepare questions that you'd like to ask to the host. So before the meeting, make sure that you have a pen and a paper and the books necessary so that you can take notes, or maybe you can follow through the book, or maybe you can do a lot of other things that require writing and stuff. So take notes. And also Zoom meetings are also discussion sessions. So also prepare the question or take notes on the things that you'd like to ask after the discussion is over. Make sure to do that. The next thing is ask questions when the discussion is over and the host permits you to ask questions. So maybe the teacher is trying to give a lecture. It's going to take like 20 or 25 minutes, which will be followed by a brief session of question answers. So wait for that session. Do not interrupt the teacher when he or she is in the middle of the discussion. The next thing is participate in the discussion while prompted. Use your chance. So if the teacher asks you to answer a question or pass your remarks on something, do that. I have seen some kind of resilience among the students. They do not want to speak in Zoom meetings. So this is probably for the technophobia they have, but it's pretty much like, using a cell phone. So when you have been given a chance, just speak because you have taken notes. And it's like you're talking to your computer, even though you're being watched. So the next thing is our discussion is, being moved on to another topic, netiquette. I'm sure you are familiar with the word netiquette. So what does the word netiquette mean? It means internet etiquette. Etiquette means to follow a certain set of codes. So a code of good behavior on the internet. So what you shouldn't do is, if you are at your campus, you cannot do whatever you want to do, right? You cannot bully someone. You cannot taunt someone. You cannot, shout at someone. You cannot call someone names, right? Those are bad things. So these are etiquettes. The same thing applies for internet. So especially on when you're communicating with someone through emails or on social media, or you're chatting with someone online, or you're on a web forum, website comments, or, playing games or something like that, online communication. In communicating with someone online, you have to definitely follow a certain set of rules. The first is to avoid posting inflammatory or offensive comments online. This is the first thing you should do when interacting with someone online. This is called netiquette. The second thing is to respect each other's privacy. I'll come to this after a while. Don't troll people on the internet or different website comment section. Don't swear or use offensive language. Why? Let's talk about that. So what is Zoom netiquette? Apart from the internet netiquette thing, the idea of netiquette, since we're talking about Zoom, we have to divert our focus into Zoom netiquette. First of all, you have to be respectful, courteous, and you have to use modest language in Zoom. Now, we have seen incidents where it happened that some intruders, which is also called Zoom bombers, what they did was to intrude into the Zoom session. The teacher was pretty old and he didn't quite understand who was doing that. So not a student maybe, or the intruder was using bad language in that Zoom session. It was very awkward. So the reason I asked you to use your name and your email address is because it gives the teacher an understanding that he's actually teaching his students. No intruder is in the online session. It gives him or her that, sense of understanding that no intruder is in the Zoom session. So that's why it's very important to use respectful and courteous and modest language in the Zoom meeting. The next thing you have to do is this is very crucial. You have probably heard about the cybercrime law, right? It's a criminal offense if you breach someone's privacy. How can you do that? By shouting at someone or calling someone names in a Zoom meeting, or taking some screenshots and record videos unless permitted. So if you take screenshots of someone or record the videos, record the Zoom meeting on your phone without prior permission, what that person whose video has been recorded can do is to file a case against you, because this is a criminal offense. You cannot record someone, you cannot post someone's pictures, videos on the internet unless that person gives you permission. And that's why never take a screenshot or record the video of the participants. So if the teacher is sharing his or her screen, you can take screenshots, that should be fine. But don't take screenshots of the pictures of the people who are participating or don't record the video, or take a screen record. Don't do that unless you have been given the permission. If you need to do that, ask for permission politely to all the participants or to the host, the teacher in this case. The next thing is a breach of Zoom netiquette is to eat or drink during the session. I understand Zoom sessions can be very hectic. You can be thirsty, you can have hunger. What you should do is to turn off your microphone and your video if you really need to eat something or to drink something. Don't eat or drink when your camera and microphone are on. Don't do that. The next thing is to leave. Do not leave the session or class without seeking permission from the host. Maybe you want to leave the session. Maybe you need to do something else. Maybe you have some other tasks to do. But this class is very important, and it's a formal class. So like you have to seek permission from your teacher in an actual class. What you should do in a Zoom class, Zoom setting, Zoom meeting, is to ask for permission from your teacher. And if the permission is granted, only then leave the Zoom class or Zoom session. Don't leave the Zoom session or on your own. I understand that your internet connection might drop once in a while, but that doesn't mean that you have to leave when your internet connection is dropped. The class is for you. The class is intended for you. So the teacher has given some efforts. Show some respect to it. The next thing is do not dress indecently. I have already focused on this, talked on this. The reason I have put this for a second time is because if you wear indecent clothing, it means that you are offending the people who are the participants in the Zoom session. Don't do that. The next thing is, sometimes it happens that in the middle of a discussion it gets a little heated and conflicts arise. If something like that happens, what you should do is to let the host, the teacher, manage the issue. The teacher is perfectly fine doing it because he or she has the kind of experiences in the past in the real setting, so he or she will do that. Don't be bothered about it. And also don't engage in a conflict. The next thing you should do is to avoid inappropriate use of chat box. There is a chat box on Zoom meeting. So what some people do is that, write stuff like, I miss all of you, blah, 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 or this and that. Don't do that, because the chat box is for official and authentic use. Don't flood it with unnecessary, unwanted messages, okay? And the final thing of this video is, remember one thing, that you are being watched. Maybe the teacher is recording the whole session for his convenience or her convenience or something else. So if you do something which is inappropriate, that violates the code of ethics, the code of law, or anything like that, you're being watched. You'll be, caught red-handed. So don't do that, okay? So that's all for today. I'm Shafiqul Islam. I'd like to thank you for watching. It has been a while, so thank you for holding with me and watching all through the video. So if you have any questions, my comment section is open for you. Post your comments or suggestions in the video section. I'll be very happy to answer your questions. So keep learning, and I hope this video session was very helpful for you. So we'll come up with some more videos on other stuff pretty soon. So till then, bye bye and take care.